Welcome, everyone. In this video, we're going to go over the decks and the metagame of the Asia Championship of the Vibes TCG. This tournament took place this past weekend in the Philippines, and there were overall 77 players who attended. So, in terms of size, it was roughly equal to Hartford, which was the North America Championships, and about twice as big, a little more than twice as big as the European Championships. The format of the tournament was 8 rounds of Swiss, followed by a single elimination bracket for the top 8 players. In this video, we're going to first look at the metagame of the top 10 decks and the top 25 decks. And after that, I picked out a set of decks which I thought were interesting to share. So here you can see the breakdown of the top 10 decks. And the reason I put the cutoff at 10 is everyone who had in the top 10 had a 6-win record for the Swiss round. So overall, what we can see here is that 60% of the decks, so 6 of the top 10, were Bellyacher builds. Now, when we go through the deck lists, you'll see there's a little variation in how to build Bellyacher. So I'll talk through a few of those. And then after that, we had a 30% Red Tower, which in my opinion is my favorite deck in the metagame, and I think has a really good matchup into Bellyacher. And then 10% BizBunk. Honestly, I'm surprised BizBunk is always kicking around because I do think that this deck is not very strong in the current metagame, but obviously someone was able to pilot it very well. Then when we expand our aperture a bit, so the top 25 decks, so really the top 26 players had 6 wins, but one of the deck lists wasn't available on the tournament site. So therefore, I'm just going to say this is the top 25 decks. So of the top 25 decks, we definitely have a bit more variety. Now, Bellyacher continues to dominate, going slightly less than 60%. At this point, it's 52%, but still a very large portion of the metagame. Then we've got Red Tower, still representing 16%. So definitely most of the red towers that were played actually made it to the top 10 of the ones that made it to the top 25. Then there's BizBunk at 8%. Caffeine, so this is your like old school green mega penguin caffeine type deck, 12%. Then we've got a little bit of Yum Yum, and then we've got one blue control deck. So this is very similar to the European Championships. That there's always seems to be like some blue control players out there, and it is possible to have some success with that deck. So overall, thinking about what happened here relative to my expectations, I was expecting Bellyacher and Yum Yum to kind of dominate this. But as you can see, Yum Yum wasn't really very popular. I think part of the reason I thought that Yum Yum would be so popular was just because for a lot of new players, the yellow cards are the easiest to get access to because the yellow starter deck is pretty good. But it turns out that that really wasn't an issue. I think Bellyacher is also a really fun deck to play, which is another reason why it's so popular, and it's much more straightforward than Red Tower or BizBunk. So overall, I'm not so surprised that Bellyacher is so dominant. I also would say that I really don't think Bellyacher is that good. Like I'm not saying it's not a tier one deck right now, but I also wouldn't say that it's like what's represented here on the pie chart is actually in terms of the absolute power of the deck. That being said, right, it is a very good deck. So I don't want to say it's not good. I just don't want to say it's like completely broken. So for example, when we think to the North American Championships, at that time, BizBunk had basically 6 of the top 8 spots. And at that point, I think BizBunk stood head and shoulders better than every other deck by a significant margin. Whereas here, I think the metagame is much more balanced. And so overall, I think this is actually a very healthy metagame, even though this chart looks a little lopsided. This also mirrors kind of how the ladder is looking right now, because yes, there's Bellyacher on the ladder, but overall, I think Bellyacher is not dominating the ladder at all. And I would even say that Red Tower has been doing better recently. The first deck we're going to look at is OX Traxx's Tower Bellyacher deck. So this is the champion deck of the tournament, and it's very interesting. So basically, how this deck works is it's kind of a combination of a red tower deck and a Bellyacher deck. So you've got a lot of the red tower elements in it, like you've got the leaning tower, you've got the introvert, and you've got the LilSinger. But then with that, we've also got the Bellyacher, and the Bellyacher side of the deck is the little lookout, as well as the champion of the clouds, the little wakers. Oh, and you've also got the bashful swordsman, and you've got also the as part of the tower build, you've got lasagnas and the PeaceOutPenguin, and then you also have the popcorn in there. I don't know. This deck is kind of crazy. My brain hurts a little bit thinking about it. That some elements of Red Tower and some elements of Bellyacher really work well to each other. So, for example, let's think about LilWaker. So, LilWaker is really strong in Little Bellyacher because Little Bellyacher can pull LilWaker and it can unflop Bellyacher. But at the same time, LilWaker is so good with Leaning Tower to finish off your opponent. Same thing as like think about Little Lookout. So, right, Little Lookout works well with Bellyacher, but it also works well with LeaningTower. And so then you've also got Colosseum in there, Bashful Swordsman. So Bashful Swordsman and Tower together with LilWaker, right? You could end up icing your opponent's penguins kind of sometimes by like forcing certain vibe check situations to end up in certain ways. So yeah, I don't know. I really like this deck. I'm really excited to try it out on the ladder. So yeah, and then also the lasagna, right? You're always thinking about how to get purple pudge for this in the red lists. But then now we've got some what's it called? We got the lookout penguin that gives some purple pudge, potion commotion, the Lil who's down bad. I'm so surprised to see this card see play, but I guess in emergencies it can be good as well. So yeah, overall, so congrats to OX Traxx. And yeah, he definitely did it with a really interesting list. So the second place deck was Asamax's Lasagna Tower. Now, I haven't made a video about this variation of the red tower yet, but it's the next on my list. And so I'm really excited to see it do well at the tournament. I will say that I'm not really sure about this specific build. So I guess what I'm referring to is the roster rods. So the like got 'em and not a rod and what a twist. So I do think this could be an interesting meta call. So right, if you're expecting to see a lot of Yum Yum, then the got 'em or a lot of BizBunk, the got 'em can be good. But I feel like right now in the ladder, it's not that good because there's just not a lot of targets at 2 vibe. That being said, right, you can't argue with results. So I think that overall, this concept of a deck is, I think, in my opinion, the strongest deck right now. And then this is a build that's, I think, tuned to the metagame that was going to happen at the tournament and obviously did very well. So overall, how this deck works is it's basically like a red tower deck, but you splash in purple. And the reason you splash in purple is so that you can play LayerALasagna, which just right now is just such a good removal card. LayerALasagna says choose a Lil with vibe 5 or less, or a non-Lil with vibe 5 or greater and ice it. And pretty much most of the powerful penguins that are going on right now can be hit with LayerALasagna. Not everything, but like pretty much most targets within decks can be hit with it. And so, right, you have to splash purple in. So you run the 4 1 drops of Lil with Moonlight, and then you run the Potion Commotion. And yeah, I also have been running seven pieces of purple pudge, and that's been sufficient to get LayerALasagna off regularly. So the other things is you're playing Tower and Fuji. I do find there's some anti-synergy here sometimes, but overall it works pretty well. And then here, the other interesting things here is 4 Bashfuls, which can be a lot, but in certain matchups, it's such a powerful card. So overall, yeah, this is a really strong deck. If you're looking to climb the ladder, I definitely recommend learning Lasagna Tower, and I think this is a good start. I guess the one heads up I would say is you might want to play around with the rods a little bit if you're not finding a lot of use out of Gotham, just because I think on the ladder this might not be as useful as it was in the tournament. Next, we have Eton's BizBunk list. Now, this list, I'm so happy to see this because this is finally like in Rome, we had a BizBunk list, but it was just a standard BizBunk old school. So here we have kind of BizBunk in the age of Legend of the Lils. So I haven't really seen a lot of BizBunk, but we can see some interesting changes that have been made. So first of all, we're playing Lil Who Slides, which is kind of like just another Bashful Swordsman, 11 vibe penguin. I'm not sure how good it is from a like staying on the board because I've really never even seen this. I have never seen this card played, to be honest. But I guess maybe it's. I mean, obviously it's easy to remove with like a caffeine, but right, if you have to use a card to remove it, then it's a 1 for 1. So it's only if they have like a card like a hungry penguin or something that can kind of like 2 for 1 it. But right, the reason you're playing this is for the 11 vibe to work with ascending. So this is what I would call like a hyper cycle BizBunk. You're really focusing just on winning as quickly as possible. Now, I do think that BizBunk right now is kind of interesting because you can also just win with the having 4 BizBunks, 4 giant bunkers on the board when playing game plan. So, because like against Colosseum, if you can get that out before the Colosseum hits, you basically win the game. So we're running very light on removal, only the 3 adventure squads, and we're running like 4 study all nights. We're also running the Inquisitive to go with the ascending. So yeah. Oh, and the LilDaydreamer, also something I haven't seen. I think this is a nod to removing Bellyachers from the board. So yeah. So anyway, this is a BizBunk list. So if you want to try BizBunk and you're interested in kind of updating it for the Legend of Lil's metagame, this might be a good place to start. Next up, we have the top 8 deck that both Staz and CaraCute played in order to get to the top 8. Now, this is a different version of Bellyacher. I'm calling it the Extrovert Bellyacher deck, where basically your win condition is little extra or not little extrovert, regular old extrovert. So you play Extrovert Penguin because Extrovert Penguin with Bellyacher can get out of control, right? Because you just keep cycling cards and it just grows forever. So you play Bellyacher with Extrovert. So it's similar to Champion of the Clouds, except for that, right? It actually grows two every time. Then on top of that, you just play all sorts of these other penguins. So you like one of the advantages of Bellyacher is that you can just draw so many different cards. Like you can just have a bunch of one ofs in your deck, and then depending on the situation, you can use whatever you want. So this deck kind of takes that really to heart because you're playing so many one ofs and two ofs. And yeah, so you basically it's also hyper aggressive, right? So because you've got the extrovert, you've got the little inquisitive, you've got the penguin who zooms, and then you're just like even like support a friend. Like like playing support a friend in this day and age, you just have to be a super aggressive deck to be playing that. And on top of that, you've got the little lookout with the Colosseum as kind of the like closer in certain matchups. And yeah, three little zoomers also just that final board control. So overall, yeah, I think this is a interesting take on Bellyacher. Obviously it worked well if two people were able to get to the top eight. I think yeah, I think for Bellyacher, there's a few ways to build it. So we talked about the hybrid tower approach. This is the extrovert approach, and we'll have one more later on in this video. So yeah, congrats to Staz and CaraCute for getting top eight with this very novel take on how to build Bellyacher. Next, we've got Arkunu's classic red tower. So this is a red tower list that really is what I would call like a previous generation. So before we have what I would call the lasagna tower, this red tower list is kind of what we were playing before we kind of discovered that deck list as a community. And so it obviously is still very strong, as you can see that someone got ninth place with it. And it just, yeah, I don't know. I think overall in the red tower list types, I think the interesting things here are we're playing the Simon Smasher and the Dima, so that's a nod to Colosseum. Also, the two Hungry Penguins is interesting, and the put on a show, like that's really the mark of an like old school red tower list, right? Because the new ones are using layer lasagna, but the old ones are using put on a show. So one of the disadvantages of put on a show is that three pudge can be very difficult to get to, but overall, yeah, I think this is a pretty standard list. Obviously worked well. And so yeah, so if you want to play red tower, but you don't really like the idea of being needing to balance the red and purple pudge, or you don't really like lasagna because it's a little more restrictive as removal, then yeah, this classic red tower is interesting. You should definitely try this out. And also, right, you've got sunburn as well, which can be really strong against Bellyacher. Next, we've got Ranier's Champion Bellyacher. Now, this is kind of one of the other ways to build Bellyacher, where you're really just building for Champion of the Clouds. So I really like this build. I've played this a lot in the past, and I think it's a really standard, like strong way to play Bellyacher. One of the challenges with this approach is you're really weak to having your Bellyacher removed, which is why I really like this list where you're playing the Spring Elites. Because the Spring Elites can protect your Bellyacher, you try to basically just use your Bellyacher, get little extrovert out, champion of the clouds, and you just make three or four giant penguins. You also play Little Zoomer, which can kind of like be a nice finisher to remove something from your opponent's deck. And we're also playing obviously Little Hoops, Little Waker. That's like standard in most Bellyacher lists. And then this deck even found space for the Inspiring Story Popcorn. So I think like in a lot of metagames, right, that makes this deck much more reactive. And so I think that's really nice as well. And then the Dima also can be nice at the top end. And then you also got the 4 times relic removal with Popping Pete and TinaWhoTears. So this Bellyacher list looks really strong into Colosseum. Now I think that Colosseum didn't really the Green Mega Penguin Colosseum didn't really do that well in the tournament, but I think that overall in the ladder this can be very strong, and I think this is a very straightforward different approach to Bellyacher. So yeah, congrats for the 10th place finish for this deck. In 11th place, we've got Nackzz. This is Caffeine Colosseum. So this is basically the standard Caffeine Colosseum list with one silent snow globe thrown in there for fun. And I mean, Snow Globe is very interesting because like it can kind of turn the game upside down. And so there are certain matchups where that can be your kind of only way to win, or if you've gotten to a bad situation. But other than that, the idea here is you just have a very fast start. You slam Green Mega Penguin, you slam some caffeines, and then you slam Colosseum. Now, we're also playing 3 Fujis, which I think is going to be a nod to BizBunk. And also against Bellyacher, it can be interesting. But there's some pretty big anti synergy with Fuji and your Green Mega Penguin. But overall, oh, and Fuji and Bashful is a good finisher too. So yeah, I can see Fuji working well in this deck. You just like you just have to make sure you when you play it, you no longer play your caffeines and your green mega penguins kind of becomes a little more useless. But yeah, overall, this deck is I think this is one of those decks that keeps the metagame in check because like it's very simple, it's very straightforward, and if you don't know how to beat this deck, and if your deck like a lot of decks just can't beat this deck. And so it just prevents like really greedy slow decks from being part of the game, which I think is a good thing because we don't really want like there needs to be a forcing function to kind of make sure there's a minimum level of like agility a deck has. So overall, yeah, 11th place is a very good finish. And yeah, this shows that even the pretty much like straightforward curve aggro deck can still do well. In 16th place, we've got BuddyBadzz Yum Yum deck. So this looks like a very, very old school standard Yum Yum. I don't think there's even any Legend of no, there's Pop and Pete. Okay, so there's Pop and Pete is the only Legend of Lil card. So I think like in Yum Yum, there's lots of different ways to build it nowadays. But this is kind of the standard like penguin that doesn't mind goodbyes, lucky penguin, check the yellow pages type build with extrovert. Yeah, I don't know how much else there is to say about it. Two mysterious penguins is not really what I expect to see in Yum Yum, but I could see in certain situations that being good. I think overall Yum Yum is one of those archetypes that just is a little on the weaker side right now, and it's just going to need a little bit of a push to get over the finish line. But it also like there's certain matchups where Yum Yum is really strong. Like for example, into Red Tower, which I think is one of the best decks right now. Yum Yum actually has a really good matchup. So I think that there are certain it's like one of those decks that I think, like, while it's a very small part of the metagame, if you're a good pilot of it, you can definitely do well with it. And I think if you're going to start playing Yum Yum, I think this is a interesting build to try, especially if you're a new player, because there's a lot of cards in here that are in the yellow starter deck. So you can basically just load up the online client, get the yellow starter deck, open some packs. If you get a few Yum Yums, you can quickly transition into this type of build. And the last deck we have, which is one of the funnest decks, is the Caser Blue Control. So Blue Control, like we had in Rome as well, we had Prison SPF's blue deck. And so here in Manila, we also have one blue deck that did well. And yeah, this deck is just I don't know. I have so much respect for blue players because I just never can get blue to work. I think one of the challenges with blue is that you just lose to BizBunk, but or not even to BizBunk, just to any decks running a Bunkus. So if there's a lot of people playing blue mill, then what happens is right, people will start taking one copy of Bunkus, and then you're in huge trouble because blue still doesn't really have a good answer to Bunkus. However, right? You saw there was very little bunkus in this deck in this tournament. And so, yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to do well. As for the build itself, right, we are basically playing the this is the rod 3 wise penguin kind of combo where you have the hyper draw and return the rods to your opponent's hand. It has a different finishing condition. So, unlike Prison SBF, who was using the title penguin, this just looks more like a grind out your opponent and just remove everything off the board type deck. You've got a great wall. So, great wall with 3 wise penguin can be really effective. But this looks much more focused on the mill win condition and the just, hey, I'm just going to remove everything off the board than the like burst mill win condition. So yeah, like I guess when I say like the mill win condition, I mean the like grind out type of condition. So yeah, I'm really excited to see blue be represented. And yeah, congrats to Caser for making it to the top 20 with this deck. All right, so there you have it. That's been a review of the decks in the metagame of the Asian Championships of the Vibes TCG. Thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.